everyone keeps telling us what can go wrong. You guys are nuts. This can go wrong. That can go wrong. This can go wrong. And I said, what if we reframe and just say what can go right? Our worst case scenario is our today reality. And that's where I think people get risk disproportionately. They think like all these things are going to go wrong. No, it's just the life you're living today.
Welcome to another episode of the 0 to 100 podcast show. I'm here with two of my favorite people and one of my favorite guests. I'm here with my co-hosts, Travis Dillard and Mitchell England, and we have a great guest today, Mr. Michael Ketchen. Michael Ketchen is a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and former high school administrator who made a bold leap into the world of real estate and never looked back. As founder of Commonwealth Collective, he now manages a portfolio of over $100 million in assets. Beyond his own investing success, Michael is passionate about helping others break into the game through one-on-one coaching. And Michael is also the founder of The Standard, a private social club that brings together professionals and entrepreneurs for meaningful connection and collaboration, and the host of the Michael Ketchen Show podcast. Known for his leadership, resourcefulness, and genuine approach to networking, Michael Ketchen's mission is clear: help people grow, take action, and live life on their own terms. Michael Ketchen, welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I mean, with that intro, I feel like I can kind of just end and go home. Now, that sounded a lot better there. I think Kaylee, my wife, updated that. That's way better than what I had.
Yeah, our advice to our listeners is just go build a $100 million real estate portfolio. Just do it.
Go figure it out.
The end.
Get smart people to make you sound better than what you are. So thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. Let's get into your story, because your background, you didn't start in real estate. You started in the school system, in the educational system. I know you love educating people today about real estate, but that's not where you got your start.
Not at all. No, actually, I was a special ed teacher, and then I became the dean of students. It's like a principal, assistant principal for one of the toughest urban schools in the country. It was Lawrence, Massachusetts. And it's amazing how much that has kind of translated and helped with the success in real estate. We were the 5th worst high school in the state. And in fact, I remember the state telling us the only reason they're not firing all of us and taking over was because they didn't have enough money to do it at that time. So we had 2 years to figure it out. And my principal took me into a room. It was basically like, hey, here's the metrics. Here's what we have to do. And we have 2 years to hit a mission. And I saw so much, man. I saw what a big vision looks like. I look what buy-in, leadership, culture looks like. And it really kind of transformed us. And, fast forward, we turned around that school. We did this impossible thing. We're the only one to this day to go from a level 5 high school to a level 1. But I was burnt out. I wanted to do something else. They redesigned the school, and we thought we were going to flip a house. Fast forward, and we're here today, over 1,000 doors, own and operate in about 9 different states, and got about $100 million. Actually, now we just closed 2 more, about $120 million worth of property.
No, congratulations. I mean, it's an awesome story, but I know there's a lot to fill in. Like our listeners know, like, all right, this guy was a teacher, administrator, and $100 million worth of real estate. So, like, why real estate? How the hell did real estate get on your radar as a teacher? And then what was your path to that 100 million in asset?
That's a great question, Gabe, because honestly, and I want to go back to what I said a second ago. I'm like, man, how do people make money? I didn't know. I grew up, single mom, financially as illiterate as can be. All right. I had to give the story I tell everybody, because the way I teach now, right? Back to financial freedom, step 1. And I tell this to everyone, including your listeners. Step 1, you got to define what I call your freedom number. And basically what that means is, what is your actual cost of living like, where you'd have to earn that passively to not have to go to work? And where I was going with that is, I'm like, well, maybe we'll do real estate. Maybe we'll flip a house, right? HGTV, all this stuff. And shout out to Brandon Turner and Bigger Pockets, because I was Googling like how to flip a house. And I saw this podcast called Bigger Pockets, and it was episode 200. I tell everybody to this day, go back and listen, because it was a recap.
Are you sure it wasn't episode 344?
No, it wasn't 344, because that guy, I didn't know that guy yet. And God bless him, meet that guy later in life.
Okay.
I can't imagine any good episodes because I never was invited to that podcast. So,
Travis, I would listen and share if you were on it. I can tell you already, it'd be more valuable. Gabe's just walking around making us all feel bad with his 12 pack and everything as we're doing.
It's not fair. I didn't know 12 was possible, but
I just saw the Camelback shirtless photo, and I'm like, this fucking guy, you know what I mean?
I know.
More motivation. So that was a recap episode, and I'm like, and no disrespect to Brandon, but I was like, these guys don't sound all that smart. It sounds like what I'm doing is harder. We can figure this out. And we went on Craigslist. We started pounding the pavement, and we had no idea what we were doing. But
what year was this, by the way, Michael? Sorry.
This was, no worries. This was 2017.
Okay.
2017. And dude, the story's wild. We drove in the middle of a snowstorm across New Hampshire into southern Maine. Saw this property in this town that we still owe that I knew nothing about this town. I just remember I went to college with a girl from there and I thought it was like a Richie area. So I'm like, oh, we'll figure it out. And we had no idea what we were doing. But the point is that everyone can take is like, if you take action. I was like, guys, I set my wife down, who's one of the owners of the company, my business partner, Matt. And I said, guys, this is either going to be the smartest thing we've ever done or the dumbest thing. But here's the deal. I'm hearing these numbers, right? These metrics, this ARV, this after repair value. And I think I'm running these numbers and I think this thing's going to be worth like $700K. We're buying it for $300K. Man, we did everything. We took out SoFi loans. Matt's parents gave us a $50K loan and we just gritted through that first project. And near the end of the project and the life-changing moment that happened to me, which I hope we'll get into the strategy because I still think it's the number one way to invest in real estate, is sticking with the podcast. I heard about something called the BRRRR method, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, but if you're not familiar with it, it's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. Unbeknownst to us, it's just a cash out refi. But we heard this thing called the BRRRR method. And again, we knew nothing, guys. There's no excuse when you're starting. Literally as an educator, knew nothing but a couple of podcasts and just trying to quote run numbers that I didn't know what the hell even that meant at the time. And we started calling all these banks. Hey, we want to do the BRRRR method. We want to do the BRRRR method. Everybody in my circle, I'm talking from attorneys to friends at the time to, anyone we were calling because my wife's mother-in-law is an attorney. We kept saying BRRRR method. So everyone goes, I don't know what that is. It sounds like a scam. That can't be real. No one knew what it was. We finally found one lender that said, I think you mean this, which was cash out refi. We'll do that for you guys on future income. And it changed our life because we bought that house for $300,000. We put $150,000 in and we walked out of the closing, keeping the property with a check for $162,000 above what we paid. And I looked at my wife and I looked at Matt and I said, this is what we'll do from now on. Cause I'd never seen that kind of money before. And I love telling that story because it's kind of got romanticized, but man, it encompasses every one of our core values, encompasses everyone on this call, everyone you listen is about taking action. Back to the analytical way to approach things. We invited the number one property manager at the time. This is like 2017. Airbnb is not huge. Online booking isn't huge yet. She came into the property where I'll never forget this when we were in the middle of the project. And she said, you guys might be lucky to get $400 a night for this place. And if we had stopped and we had listened to what someone else told us about our future, I would not be sitting here today. Today, that property rents out for almost $2,000 a night.
So that's an Airbnb. The first one was Airbnb.
Yeah, first one's Airbnb. Yep. And again, it just goes to show you got to push through. You got to have that grit and you got to have a vision and a dream. And that's what I think it really starts with is belief in yourself and taking action above everything else.
Terry, we see so many people like they know all the numbers. They know they do the opposite. They just know everything. Oh, I've read all the books. I've done the podcast, whatever. It's 10, 20 years later, they haven't bought a single property. And you're like, well, you got to pair that with action. So I'm curious, going back a little bit, episode 200, was that about Airbnbs or short-term, or where was your head at for like strategy right now? Where you're like, I just got to go find cash flow. Like, what were you thinking at the very first property?
We said we were just going to flip a house and we just wanted to do something that made what we thought was what rich people, right? I have no idea. Decided to read Rich Dad Poor Dad again at the time. And what you said there that's super impactful is, and I think it's about reframing. This is something that helped us. One, I'm just stubborn, as Gabe knows. I get my mind on something and I go. But I had also realized that I was like, all right, I set my wife down, I set Matt down, the two other owners, like, look, everyone keeps telling us what can go wrong. You guys are nuts. This can go wrong, that can go wrong, this can go wrong. And I said, what if we reframe and just say what can go right? Our worst case scenario is our today reality. And that's where I think people get risk disproportionately. They think like all these things are going to go wrong. No, it's just the life you're living today. So when you reframe it and you realize my worst case is just going back to what I did today. I have to get in the game if I'm going to build something else.
I love that. It's a risk. It's the way you look at risk. You know?
Yeah. And that was the whole reframing that kind of like catapulted us. And I guess what I tell everybody, and I really believe this, at the time it was more conviction, but I really believe it now. When someone is giving you advice and someone's projecting onto you, they're projecting their fears and insecurities onto you. And what I always say, especially when it comes to advice, so anyone listening to this podcast, take it all in. But if one of the guests, if one of the hosts isn't living the life similar to what you want, they're not building the businesses that you want, you can kind of take their advice and you can politely tell them to fuck off because they're not doing what you want to do. They're not living your dream. So don't let someone else build your dream. It's your dream for a reason. But what that means is you got to put yourself in position to succeed. You got to put the work in. You got to read the books. You got to go to the networking events. You got to lever up. You got to take action. And to me, risky is getting to the end of the road, giving all of my best years building someone else's dream and not being intentional about my own dream. And that's kind of how we looked at risk.
I absolutely love hearing you say that. I mean, it reminds me of, it just reminds me when I got started, I had all these people in my life. What if this? All these things. What if it goes wrong? And, if you recall, I was working a minimum wage job, right? And I thought the exact same thing, like, what if it all goes right? What if some of it goes right? And none of those people had the life that I desired, right? And so like, early on, it's like, just like you're saying, be careful with who you take your advice from. If they're not living the life that you want or something similar, like probably not the right people to be taking advice from.
That is so common too. I mean, anytime I've endeavored to do something big or take risks, again, it comes down to who you surround yourself with. The people that are saying, why would you do that? Get a job. That's risky. I love that you also look at risks that way, because my biggest fear was just getting to the end of my life and never trying anything and giving, like you said, 30, 40 years of your life to somebody else to build their dreams. And that's way riskier than the countertops don't go well, when you're flipping a house or you're renovating a house and someone doesn't like it. I mean, the reward definitely outweighs the risks when it comes to that.
There's a hidden gem there too. Sorry, Michael. I'm just like, I want to call this out because it's like when I started out, I took advice from a lot of people who own, like, say, a duplex or 4 units or whatever, right? And what did they say to me? Oh, it's hell, man. You got to self-manage. You got to be there all the time, mowing lawns and kicking people out and changing light bulbs and all the bullshit. And I'm like, I took advice from people that were really far below where I wanted to be. And it took me years to actually seek somebody out that was where I wanted to be and listen to them. The problem is that's like 1%. It's like, you got to try to find them on purpose. It's not going to be likely your family or friends. And so how do you find people that are where you want to be and actually listen to them versus the masses, I think. Anyway, keep going.
No, and that actually is perfect what I was going to say next, because I think the thing that people think, right, they're going to hear this podcast, the four of us, like, oh, you guys are all successful. You've done it. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the problem with society as a whole. We look at the result when we should look at the process. So let's go back to the process and the part that anybody who hears this can do. Think of all the free action items you can take. YouTube University is free. Listening to podcasts like this great one are free. Going to networking events are free. So the first thing I try to tell anybody is, where are you spending your time? Because you might lie to yourself, but your calendar doesn't, right? So it's like, if you want to get in the room and you want to find those people, well, you got to take a lot of swings at the plate. So I would tell anybody, hey, 3 nights a week, go find local meetups, go find networking events, go try to find a mentor, go read books. I got so obsessed when I knew that this was out there, especially when I was like, there's another way to earn money. There's another way to live. I would not allow myself. Music was a treat. I give myself 60 minutes of music on a Sunday, and that was it. The rest of the time was books, podcasts, Googling questions, meeting people. That's all free stuff, guys. So what kills me is they go, oh, look at Gabe, so successful. I want to be like Gabe. That's great. You're seeing this version of Gabe. What you don't know is the guy that got out of the army, that grinded, that pushed so hard to do creative deals. You're seeing the result. You got to go study the process of Gabe. And that's free because that comes down to your effort and your intentionality. And a lot of people, unfortunately, get it backwards. They focus on the result and they try to take a shortcut. And that's why they usually fall short. And it goes back to that kind of whole, show me your intentions and I'll show you your outcomes.
Yeah, I love it. That's great advice. I mean, there is so much free information. I mean, we live in a time where the information's out there. It's easier than ever to make connections and build relationships with people. I want to get into your story of how you scaled, but I also want to go back to, you mentioned that, we call it R1, but that financial freedom number. What was that initial financial freedom number that, to replace your income? Because it sounds like on that first deal, you did really well. And I'd like to take a guess that was probably more than you were making at your job.
Yeah. I was making about right around 100K, right? But it's what you earn. It's what you keep, not what you earn. And when we first left, you want to talk about taking a risk. My wife was making right around 100. I was making right around 100. Matt was making, we were all about the same. When we first left to go full time and go all in, not only did we take a massive pay cut, we were set to close a 31 unit deal that the bank pulled at the closing table, which I didn't even know they could do that. So I just quit my job. I'm in the middle of this deal that I think is going to change my life, and the bank pulls the loan. So when we first went, we looked at our freedom number and we got it down to, we realized we only needed $6,000 a month combined, me and my wife. 6,000, right? Now, were you making a lot of sacrifices? Were you cutting a lot of things? Yes. But I think back to that advice of figuring out what your freedom number is. I'm not, like I tell people all the time, and I'm sure you guys do it with your method. I'm not saying your ideal life, go live on the beach, go buy a vacation home. Because what wasn't clear to me at the time that I wish I knew back then, and I tell this to anybody, that's your freedom number to start. And you start choosing to work versus having to work. But what that does, now you get a chance to spend all your time doing what you want. And when you're an entrepreneur and you're successful and you're a risk taker and you take action, man, does that start to kind of take leaps and bounds when you free up all that time. And like I said a second ago, yeah, there's the free piece, but there's also the education piece. And I'll tell you this, when I started paying for education, that's when our business exploded, right? We got to that $10,000 a month number in passive income. And then I said, okay, I got to go from real estate investor to professional, real estate professional. I met Gabe in a group like the 50, right? I'm doing the high level mastermind. Some people show up, you get out of it what you put in. But to me, that was a lot of money. I paid more in real estate education in 1 year than I paid for a whole college degree. And it literally 5X our net worth in our company. But I was mentally ready to receive that at that point because I built that foundation.
Well, people forget the time piece. We always say that time is the new currency of the rich, and we try and look at everything through the lens of time. Gabe is a great example. I always use him beyond just his 12 pack. I always talk about the fact that Gabe always had he was born with his had abs, but the number was $1,500 a month. And his month wasn't life changing. He certainly wasn't, jetting around in a, vacationing and things like that, but it gave him, we always say this 40 to 50 hours a week back. And man, if you're intentional with that time, that's where you start to compound the results. And the time piece, freeing up that time is step one, whatever that takes. Get your time freed up. And then that's when the magic really starts happening. And to echo what you were saying earlier, we live in a society and a culture where we just look at the end game, right? The influencers on Instagram, the nice cars, the vacations, and we're an impatient culture. People don't like the grind. In fact, we see it in our tribe times where people they want the end result, but you're like, yeah, but you've got to dig in. You've got to understand how to build a platform, how to generate equity, how to tap that equity, how to take one meaningful step after the other. That's not sexy on social media. That's not exciting. People don't want to see that. But the people that really elevate themselves and really join the 1% are the 1% of people that change their mind and really look at life through a different lens. So I love that you said that. And it certainly is a common thread through us and our successful guests. Sometimes it's boring, man. We're looking at 100 deals a month, writing letters of intent, underwriting deals, all of that isn't sexy. It doesn't look good on Instagram, but it's absolutely has to happen.
Yep. It's the process, not the results. And I know if Gabe, you were just in Fiji, and I guarantee you got people messaging you, oh, this vacation's awesome. This is great. Yet you'll put up something where you did a creative seller finance deal and you might get 2 comments. Like, it kills me. It's like, this is what got the vacation guy. But everybody can control that.
Yeah, I think too, what's interesting is the R1 or the financial freedom or whatever you call it. Like you said, it doesn't, I think people think about jet setting immediately. Oh, I'm going to be rich through real estate, so I can go to Fiji and do all these things or whatever. But I think the key and the first step, the first domino is get your time back. I don't think people understand that are working full time in a job, the opportunities that come to you when you wake up and you have time. It's incredible. You start to see the world differently. You start to progress and compound way faster when you have that time. And the time doesn't need to be, for listeners, it doesn't need to be, like you said, it was 6,000 for you. Maybe it was 1,500 for Gabe. It was pretty low for me as well. But that was the most important piece. It wasn't having a nice house. It wasn't a nice car. It wasn't a vacation. It was, I want to leave my job. I just want to leave my job. And once I left, that changes things. You see everything differently and you have so much time. You're not worn out at the end of the day from a W-2, right? You're able to sort of see a lot of opportunity, think abundantly, actually network and meet people outside of business hours or inside of business hours, I should say. So I love that piece, man. That first step is so key.
All I wanted, my first dose of freedom, the way I define it, my first goal, my first BHG, big hairy goal, if you will, I just didn't want to set an alarm clock. And what I challenge everybody, I don't care if you're making $1,000 a month or 100,000 a month. If someone else is controlling your calendar, by my definition of wealth, you're not wealthy. By my definition of wealth, I do what I want when I want. You know what I mean?
That was my driver. I wanted to own my time. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, with who I wanted to do it. I love the action piece, right? Because there's so many people, and I talk to young investors, early 20s, and, I ask, how bad do you actually want it? Go put a creative finance deal together, or go do a 3.5% down FHA loan, go buy 4 units on that 3% down FHA loan, and live in the smallest room of the smallest unit and rent out the other rooms. And maybe you're cash flowing a little bit, or maybe you've just got completely rid of your, living expense, which is most people's biggest expense. And I've had people look at me and go, I don't want to do that. And I'm thinking, you're 22 years old, don't have kids, you don't have a family, go save 3.5%, buy a fucking fourplex, live in the smallest side. Like, if you won't make that sacrifice, this is going to be tough. In
what country can you do that? I mean, I'm just speaking probably I'm being naive here, but where can you go put 3.5% to 5% down and buy 4 units and use other people's money to really jumpstart your success? I mean, very few countries probably in the world afford you that opportunity, but then again, people don't take advantage of it ever.
Also, though, what country can you go take those risks? And if it goes wrong, you're not put in jail. Honestly, you can take risks here and it's not going to end you in jail or with a record. I hate to say it, but like, we live in a country that's pretty forgiving to go take risks. Sorry, Michael, I cut you off.
No, Mitch, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think back to the way people view risk, there is no, and this is probably going to be controversial, so I'm going to apologize in advance. We're going to cancel. Yeah, there is no real poverty in the United States of America. If you live in this country, you won the lottery. And I'll challenge anybody, go to a true third world, go where they don't know if they have running water, if they don't know if they have plumbing, if they don't know if they have Wi-Fi. I mean, you wake up, every one of us walks around with a fucking supercomputer in our pocket, right? Like, if you don't understand and that's why, to Gabe's point, what kills me is we are crippled by opportunity today. We are literally crippled by opportunity. And when you start to think about what's abundant and what's out there, and you shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance, right? And the way we do it is, we got the freedom number, but the second part of that training is, and the question I ask everybody is, what do you want your typical Tuesday to look like 5 years in the future? When do you wake up? Where do you wake up? Who do you wake up with? Do you have coffee? Who are you having coffee with? Walk me through that whole day. Paint me that vivid vision, right? Show me what that looks like. And then what we do is we take the freedom number, we take the North Star, that 5-year vision, what does that Tuesday look like? And we just fill it in brick by brick. And next thing you know, that clarity comes. But it's like, how bad do you really want that? Because to Gabe's point, you might say, I want this. I want the car. I want this. Again, those are all results. What are you willing to give to get those results? And I just find that that switch can flip so quick for so many people, but a lot of people are just happy going through the motions, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but that's not for me.
But they're also very uncomfortable. Those people that are fine going through the motions, and I mean, again, this might be controversial, but live somewhat of a mediocre life. Those are the people that are terrified when someone like Michael comes to them and says, Gabe, this is my vision. This is what I want to be. This is what I want to be doing in 5 years. These are the risks I want to think. This is how I'm going to think outside the box. That's really uncomfortable for those people. And it's only human nature for them to poo that and say, that's risky. Why would you do that? You're going to lose everything. You're going to be under a bridge drinking rotten milk. You're going to be homeless. It's easy for them to say that because it validates sort of the life they've chosen to live.
It's a miscalculation of risk. I mean, I know people that work, in our country, we have people who work a minimum wage job and they can afford a room that's totally temperature controlled. The refrigerator is completely full. They have a car that they use for transportation. Like, falling to the bottom, living under a bridge, that's going to be a different choice. That's going to be drugs or alcohol or whatever. But like, we have a country, like you said, Michael, where if you just put in the bare minimum, you're afforded a pocket computer, has all the world's libraries in your pocket, right? Temperature control, car, everything. And so it's like the downs. I completely agree that people miscalculate the risk. And because of that, they're frozen. They stay in a job that they feel like it's stable, and they live a life that maybe they don't like.
Well, Warren Buffett just said that, I think in his I was reading the notes from his most recent annual shareholder meeting. He was like, first and foremost, if you were born in this country, you won the lottery. Step one, right? And that does set you up in a very abundance mindset. You're like, wow, like I've already got this amazing platform that I can build on.
But Americans don't know it though. They don't know it. Most people don't know it. They haven't traveled. They also get myopic on that person was born into money. I was born into poverty. They're a step ahead of me. People get myopic and they focus on where the starting gate is. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty damn good starting gate, regardless of who's ahead and not.
That's the whole gap in the game and the whole mindset. But even going back to what you guys were saying there a second ago, when you think about all 4 of us on this call, all took different investing journeys, all took completely different paths, right? When I say crippled by opportunity, there are so many ways to build wealth in this country. You just have to show up consistent. And what drives me up a wall is, and this one, you finally made it, is when someone starts commenting things like must be nice, right? Or how lucky is that guy? Or well, again, you didn't see the work, you didn't see the risk. You guys are putting out an amazing podcast here, just for example, that could literally change people's lives. You guys wrote a book that can change people's lives. Those things cost next to nothing, right? But when you get the golden handcuffs, when you build the life from that place of fear, that place of misunderstanding risk and how it aligns, next thing you know, you wake up, like I've never met the person who's on the deathbed and goes, man, I really regret taking that risk. It's like they give us the answers to the test, but we're afraid to take the test.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Michael, you mentioned earlier about laying bricks, to get you to that five-year vision. And, you didn't start 30 years ago, 20 years ago. You started in 2017. So I'm curious, what bricks were you laying, after that first deal to get you to that 5-year vision or get you where you are today, which is really, only a couple years beyond that 5-year vision. I'm very curious to, your origin story is amazing, but what were those bricks that you were laying to get you where you are today?
So I do that exercise I told everybody constantly, and it's constantly evolving. And the first was I just didn't want to set an alarm. Then when we did the BRRRR method on the Airbnb, we were like, okay, let's figure out a way to do this again. Looking back, we got some unbelievable deals that fit a very loose buy box that luckily, the market helped support us and we were able to execute. But a moment that really was pivotal for me is back to what I said, it was our lowest moment in business. It was when the bank pulled the note for that 31 doors. And I made a promise to myself, to my wife, who's my business partner, and to my other business partner, Matt, where I said, we were about a year into the business at that point. And what happened was, a little backstory, come to find out that bank was actually in trouble. We didn't know that. We were going to be their biggest client because they had a $5 million max, a limit of loans. We were going to be their biggest client. Our first year of business, we didn't even have a tax return, which looking back is just wild to say. But we were going through it. We were just taking action, right? We're buying buildings. We're doing things. Well, when they pulled the loan, and the pivotal moment to me was I said, I will never, ever have this happen again. I will get obsessed with how banks work in real estate lending. And Gabe, that really was the next kind of launching point because I said, okay, how does a bank look at a deal? And that's when we came up with kind of our underwriting model where we move really fast when the deal works because we're so conservative and in tune with how a lender, because at the end of the day, real estate really is a debt game, right? It's either creative finance, banks finance, equity you raise from it, whatever it is, it's a lending game.
Which is interesting, just to touch on that, I feel like it's a piece that's so important to every single real estate deal, unless you go and pay, cash for a property. But even that, there's pluses and minuses to doing that. But I feel like debt, with all the real estate conversations they have, all the investors, I feel like debt is actually not talked about enough. And almost every real estate deal is leveraged. And oftentimes the debt you get on a property is literally what makes the property work or not, right?
100%. And we got obsessed with that. And we started learning about how debt works, how our underwriting works, and the way we were able to scale so quick. I mean, guys, we syndicate now. We have a few syndications, but the first 80, 90 million of property was just me, Matt, and Hannah in creative finance. And we had to buy deals. And that's why I laugh when people floating debt at 6%. You're buying thin deals. You're transacting. We're used to buying deals with hard money at 10, 12, 15, sometimes 20% to keep more of the equity. And the way you build wealth, and I say this all the time, actually, Ken McElroy had a great quote. He said it better than I did. Cash flow solves problems. Equity gives you options. And the way I always thought of it was cash flow is king, but equity is like the kingdom, right? Because equity is how you build your net worth. And what Travis said earlier, I think everyone should go back and listen to 3 times. Equity is how you build your wealth. Cash flow does. It comes in. It's very important. But if you don't own it, right, you're diluting yourself down. You're trying to look good. I got 10,000 doors. I got whatever. One real estate deal can change your life depending on how much you owe and what it does, right? Door counts are relevant. I'm sorry. If you see a guy on Instagram, I got 10,000 doors, great. He probably doesn't own any of it. It's irrelevant. How much do you own? How much is it tied to your goals? And that's what we realized. So we started doing deals with hard money where if we executed and we performed for that BRRRR method, we would own 100% of the deal. So we built that entire portfolio with $0 of our own money, right? Refi, pay back both the senior debt and the second position debt, and now we own 100% of the asset. Now time has appreciated. We're on our second and third cash out refi of some of these deals. The building I'm sitting in talking to you guys right now is the first multifamily deal we ever did. We bought it for $780,000. We put in $120,000 the first time. Today, this building just appraised for $2.3 million. We're adding 4 more units to it. It'll be worth about 3.1. Never mind the cash flow, just the equity appreciation, the tax benefits, and the cash out refis over the last 8 years. We've probably made about 650 grand off this one 13-unit building because we own 100% of it.
Well, you mentioned something too that I love that you said this, and I'm guilty of this as well. If you have a lot of cash, whether it's like investors that are dumping, $5 million into a fund, whatever the case is, if you have a lot of cash, it starts to make you lazy, right? And you stop thinking like an entrepreneur. You're not scrappy anymore. And I think that's really critical because Mitch will tell me this all the time. He'll be like, yeah, we're doing great. Things are fantastic. He goes, but don't go back to the fundamentals and be scrappy and think like an entrepreneur. Because if you have a bank account stuffed full of cash, you start getting lazy. And then you make marginal investment decisions. You don't get as creative with seller financing or second positions, et cetera, et cetera. I think everybody, regardless of how successful you are, you need to go back and remind yourself to think like an entrepreneur and be scrappy. What got you to that point to begin with?
I think maybe my upbringing and watching my mother, to be honest. I mean, I always had kind of an edge. I mean, Gabe knows I'm being pretty calm right now. I'm a little intense. And I don't know. I have big goals. I have big dreams. I get obsessed, but I just like something I'm super proud of. And the day will come where it won't happen. But one thing I'm incredibly proud of, and we've done this in multiple states on large assets. We have never not successfully bird out a deal in under 15 months, ever. That's on 100 plus unit apartment buildings. I mean, we go fast. And our buy box and our framework makes us do deals that have enough upside, not just the cash flow. That's a low goal for to be able to get an infinite return in 15 months or less. And I think it goes back to, I refuse to compromise on my life, my dreams, and my vision. And I will relentlessly destroy anything that gets in the way of it. And I think when you know that and you attack and you understand, like, I mean, I grew up with nothing. I mean, literally nothing. I watched my mother work 2 jobs. I had to be the man of my house, raising my brothers from the age of 7. Dad was out of the picture. And I remember even as a kid asking myself, like, why are we poor? Why are we settling for this? There must be something I don't know. Because I was an inquisitive kid and I was pissed. I had an edge. And then I became an adult and I realized, no, people settle, they get complacent, and I get to choose my outcomes. And the only reason I even ended up in education was I was trying to figure out ways to make a lot of money and I was in between sales jobs. And then there was a problem to solve, and turns out I was a pretty good problem solver. And we turned around the school that was this like impossible thing to do to everyone who thought it was impossible. We just didn't know any better. We just said, we have a goal, we have to attack it, and everything else be damned. And it's the same thing in business. If I have a goal I'm going to get to, it doesn't mean I'm going to take a straight path. I'm going to have to go left, I'm going to have to go right. But if that's my end point, that's where I'm going. It shows up in our investments, it shows up in our business, it shows up in our culture. If you stand in the way of our goals, you're going to get destroyed.
Well, and also know the end goal, because like, I think you mentioned it, like you go left, you go right. There's also peaks and valleys. There's setbacks. And if you know damn well where you want to be in 5 years and you are relentless about pursuing that goal, setbacks, you're going to drive right through those. You're going to be a problem solver instead of a crier. And you have to embrace the journey. We had someone on our podcast last week that said, there's always going to be problems, especially in real estate. There's always going to be, someone wielding a machete running around your apartment complex, acting like an ass. Like you just roll with it. And
we just had one. We just had one. I can share it now because it's settled. We had a tenant, and this goes back to the power of reframing. We had a tenant sue us for something that their lawyer straight up told us, you guys are going to win, but it's going to take 2.5 years to fight it. We had already spent 40 grand to fight it. It was going to cost $250,000 to fight it. Take 2 years. I had to explain it to every lender why we were in a lawsuit. It was a frivolous lawsuit. We ended up having to write them a check for $200K, and that's because we won. And I said, how fortunate are we to be able to bless these people with the biggest check they're ever going to get, and to us, we're in a position to write it and move on to bigger and better things. It's all that reframing.
I'm thinking about suing you right now.
Gabe, I can counter sue you though. You actually have something to pay me. They did it. You know what I mean?
Michael, you mentioned financing. You mentioned, some hard money, private money. I'm curious, you mentioned, hey, doing these at 10, 11, 12%, 15%, even 20%. I'm curious, how'd you find these hard money lenders? How'd you build those relationships? I know, I walked into, and I've shared this often, I walked into my now private money lender's office years before I ever asked for money and looked like an absolute crazy man, because all I knew is I needed to get myself around people in the real estate business world. And she looked at me like I was crazy. I probably looked crazy. I literally just walked in her office. but today she has financed millions and millions of dollars of real estate deals, right? And so I'm curious, for one, like, who are these lenders that you've worked with? Why do they know you, like you, and trust you? And then what does that deal structure look like? If you're buying a, undervalued property, like, or you said you're bringing no money to the table, are they financing 100% of the purchase price, 100% of the rehab? Is a thing. I've had lenders finance 100% of the purchase and, renovation and so on. So I'm just curious. There's a lot of questions, man. I'm sorry. That was a lot of questions.
We'll go step by step, and you tell me how high level you want to get on the last part of it, walking through the structure. But to answer your question, our first lender was actually the guy that we bought that first property off of Craigslist. He was wholesaling it, and he was a hard money broker, and we've done over 20 million in loans together. He's one. Two, the second thing I go back to, and I would tell everybody who wants to get into real estate, you need to put in your calendar at least 1 hour a week to learn how banks work, to learn how they think. Because it kills me how everyone will be like, they get so worried about the rehab costs. They get so worried about the zip code and the permitting. And it's like, this whole game is debt and equity. Everything else is literally irrelevant if you don't get those right. So get obsessed with that. I think it's a missing spot in the education space.
Well, I think a lot of people, I was the same way. They get frustrated with the lenders. They're like, I don't understand. It'll cash flow. It's fine. They don't understand things like debt service coverage ratios. They don't understand that banks only have downside. Really. I mean, they make interest and fees, but they only have downside. They don't have that equity upside that you were talking about. But if you start looking at deals like a lender and you really stress test your properties and you understand the downside and you understand that cash flow over your debt service is a cushion, and you start looking at things through the lens of a lender, you're going to underwrite your properties more conservatively, more effectively, right? But you're also going to stress test the downside, and you're also going to make banks appreciate you. Because if you get on a call with a lender and you're like, it's great, it's a beautiful property, look at the beautiful flowers and it's got nice windows, and they're like, but if you're like, look, here's the LTV, here's the debt service coverage ratio, here's how I stress test the downside, here's if I lose 30% of my income, here's how I can continue to service the debt, and you can speak like a banker, they're going to go, Michael knows what he's talking about, and that lens gives me confidence to lend money to him.
Travis just said something that's the power of commercial real estate the average person doesn't understand. Your personal income matters until it doesn't. Any property over $1 million, the asset matters, which that's the irony of the whole thing, right? So it's like you're incentivized in the world of commercial real estate to go bigger. So what you do is you partner with someone who has a track record, you put your equity in, you borrow their experience, you execute and perform, and guess what? You get something called a schedule of real estate owned. You get a track record. You start getting those reps. So you have to get in the game to build the track record to get lenders more comfortable with you. Now, back to what Gabe said. We've done a lot of things where there's senior debt. That's your first lender. That can be private, bank, whatever it is. Then what we did a lot of was promissory note, private loans, and even we have some lenders that are okay sitting in second position as debt. They're getting a preference. So that's how we get that 100% stack, right? The third and most impactful question, and I'll challenge anyone who wants to hear this to understand the power of debt versus equity. I'll use one deal that we just went full cycle on, but it's a real deal, real numbers. There was a deal, a 50 unit in Kansas City, that the seller, I love when the seller is on the property walk. It's my favorite thing in the world. He had his little cowboy hat on and he's like, I know the numbers and no Section 8 over here, partner. And I'm like, love it. Cowboy Gary. What they didn't know is the broker thought the market rents were $945. We had run ghost ads. That's an operational thing that we do before we buy a property. We put up a fake ad. We knew the market rate was $1345. So we bought this with the first position private note at 11%. And then we had one lender, right? It's a complex structure, but essentially you make a separate entity offline that he has shares in that interest and you buy back that interest when you pay him off, is the way it's structured. He wrote a check for the entire down payment. Now he was getting 20% simple interest. So everyone goes, oh my God, that's massive. You're right. Let's walk through a traditional structure. We bought this for $4.5 million. We're paying him 20%. The building then just appraised for 7.3. We owe 100% of the upside. There was no rehab in this one. It was basically just management. So now we just created almost a $3 million increase in our personal net worth. We now cash flow in that building 17 grand a month. And we paid this guy 20% on his debt, nothing out of pocket. If we had gone syndication, we would have had to usually pay probably a 7 or 8% pref. So that's already 7 or 8%. And then we would have been diluted to 30% of the equity in a best case scenario. Never mind the legal filing fees and everything else. And I am not telling everybody you have to do one way or the other. I'm just showing you the power that if we have $3 million in equity, if we had diluted ourselves to 30%, we would only had $1 million. So that extra 12% that everyone freaks out about because they focus on spreadsheets, they need to get in the streets and get off the sheets, would have cost us $2 million. We're only able to do that because our buy box, just like Travis said, we stress test every deal to when we're 100% stabilized, we have to hit at least a 1.4 DSCR on the take. And we just think like a lender. And that's the only type of deals we do. Boom, 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 boom. Rinse, wash, repeat. And that's all we do.
Well, you mentioned a management play too, because I think a lot of people are like, well, how could you buy something for what'd you say, 4 million?
4.5. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and a lot of times people think they got to get construction crews and they have to get permits and they have to put all this CapEx into it and they have to inject all this risk in the deal. But we know with commercial real estate, for every annual dollar of net operating income or profit, that's your income minus expenses, not counting debt service, you increase the value 10 to 20 times. So you control the appreciation. You know, going into that deal, exactly what it's going to be worth, what the debt's going to be on that, what your equity is going to be in 12, 18 months, as opposed to a single family house where you sort of hope it appreciates. And if you know that, if you can stress test the downside, but you're pretty damn sure you know what you're at. Okay, so say you fell short and you only increased the value $2 million. Oh, shucks, I took $2 million of upside. But you know damn well where you're going to be at in the next 12 to 24 months, which then also de-risks it because it's a management play. It's just optimizing the property. You don't have to inject a bunch of capital and spend 3 years developing it.
I love that. I think we call that a lazy reposition, right? It's poorly managed and under rented. You just said there's no rehab cost. So getting the rents from, I think you said 945 to 13, whatever, like what an easy reposition. I mean, or is it notices from the property manager to the tenants just to get it up to market rent? You created $3 million of value just based on poor management and an under-rented property. To me, that seems way easier than going to rehab in, 50 units.
Yep. And we've done those too. But I mean, I like to say our company motto is we're not value add investors. We're efficiency investors. And in real estate, you get rewarded the more efficient you make something that's inefficient. That's kind of how we look at it.
I love it. Well, you had mentioned that you guys do some syndications now. I'm trying to go back linearly. You bought the first house, you did a BRRRR, and then was the next property the 13 unit, a 30 unit? What is that? Give us the next couple of just high level, how you parlayed that first deal into multiple deals.
Yeah. So we were in the middle of that first one. And dude, you want to talk about a wild story. The guy we hired, so this is how crazy. We knew, back to risk. We were getting quotes. We had no idea what we were doing. Every other contractor was like $180,000 for the project. There was this like alcoholic drunk guy who my buddy had used before, who goes, I'll do the whole thing for 38 grand. We're like, all right, you're hired. And we knew how this movie was going to end, but we're like, he'll get us as far as he can get us, and then we're already in the money.
Before it passes out, yeah.
Yeah, he got us about 3 weeks in before he called me from a jail cell because he had to get bailed out.
No way.
Well,
whoopsie.
Oh, dude, he was shooting guns in the woods behind a school in the back of the neighborhood. It was a whole thing.
Mitch, I told you that's a bad idea. Stop doing that.
Yeah, you shoot one gun in the back of the woods by school, and everyone judges it. Like, my God.
So we had to fire him. So we worked, my stepfather and another guy, and me and myself, Matt and Hannah, we worked 7 days a week for 7 straight weeks. We were there on the weekends. They were there during the week to hit our first kind of Airbnb stay coming. Well, then we needed a couple of subs. So we hired a guy off Craigslist. He goes, oh, I see what you guys are doing. Hey, this is again, how just fate works. I can't really explain it. Another property down the street just fell out of contract. You should go offer. Dude, we picked that one up down the street. It was complete, disaster. But we picked it up for 185. So to give you context, we picked that one up for 185. We picked this one up for 300. Today, these two houses are worth a combined 2.7 million.
Jeez.
So, this was just steals, right? Then we go and flip a house. And then the day that changed everything was, I mentioned at the start of the call, my mother-in-law is a real estate attorney. We were outside visiting them, and she walks over and she goes, are you ready for your first multifamily building? I have a client who can't sell this 13-unit building, literally the one I'm sitting in now. And I said, sure, how hard can that be? And this is the power of partnership. Good. And then surrounding yourself with the right people. So we get this apartment building I'm in now. The studios are legitimately 300 feet. And to give you context, Southern New Hampshire, we're like sub 5% vacant. There's no housing. And I'm freaking out. And I'm going, what did we just do? Why would anybody ever live in this room? This thing, no one's going to pay for it. And my business partner, shout out to Matt Hitchcock. Matt is just wired. He's so good. He's so like yin to my yang. And he goes, $600. I already got this thing on Craigslist for $1,000, dog. That's how Matt talks. And we had leads at 1,000 and it blew my mind. And I was like, oh my God, I got to stop thinking like I'm the one living here. This is a business. It became a pivotal moment where I was like, all right, we kind of all got in our lanes and we started to explode. And dude, we birthed this one. We birthed another one. We bought another 13 unit, all creative finance. And it just rolled. And we were around, I think 300 or 400 doors just using that same method, right? Of keeping all that equity. And then COVID happened. And I said, this is going to be the greatest opportunity of our lifetimes because everyone's running away, but none of the fundamentals have shifted. They just kicked the can down the road. We're still like 10 million housing units short. So, the government just showed us they're paying us rents. They're not going to put people on the streets. We need to go all in. And that kind of was the progression and the timeline.
You mean when the house was burning and everybody was running out, you're like, oh, I'm going to run into this burning house. And you're thinking like a contrarian. You also mentioned earlier, a lot of people, they get discouraged because it could take 12, at least in our world, it could take 12 to 24 months to get that first deal. It's tough, right? And you start to get discouraged, but I see it time and time again. We see it time and time again. After you get that first deal, you have some success, you get some notoriety with, bankers, with brokers, and also you get some confidence in yourself. That second deal comes so much faster. That third deal comes even faster. And then it really starts to explode if you continue to apply the fundamentals and not lose track of what got you success in those first few deals.
We closed our first deal in March of 2017. We formed the LLC in March of 2016. We looked at over 100 properties for a year that none of them worked.
And you could have given up. A lot of people we have people that say, I just look at Crexy, it's all too expensive, I give up.
Yeah, and that goes back to what Gabe said. I mean, I would tell you anybody, if you're willing to give up on your dream that quick, you don't really have a dream, you have a desire. You have an idea of something that looks good. You want to be on the Fiji photo, but you don't want to put the work in to get to Fiji. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Well, I think too, when we're talking about this, like I always go back to like my definition of an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of definitions, but like somebody who goes with very little money out into the marketplace and figures out how to put the pieces together and create value. I love that definition because like it's an ultimate insurance policy for me. If I understand I can go out into the marketplace, I can create value out of basically nothing, right? And following your method and what you've talked about, you're doing exactly that. And so for listeners, think about it like Michael's not talking about putting down hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. He's talking about using creative debt, finding opportunity, right? The lenders love the deal. That your team loves the deal. You're able to force appreciate and create value out of nothing. And like understanding that and creating that, not only are you creating wealth, but you have the ultimate insurance cost. You get it. You understand how to go create that from literally nothing. I think that's an incredible power to have. And like Travis said, when you get a lot of money and you have a lot of money in your bank account, it can get dangerous because you get lazy. But I look back on our portfolio and our best deals still to date was when Trav and I had no money, like literally like maybe 10 to 20 grand a piece in our pocket. We made the best deals, right? When we sold something, we capitalized, we had a lot of money. Well, we started to make soft deals. And I noticed that. I'm like, we got to go back to thinking like we have nothing and creating value. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
That's the mindset piece. And that's why the education piece is so important. Like, I mean, I'm probably a sociopath. I don't know, but it's like the Last Dance with Michael Jordan. I get around guys like Gabe and I'm like, damn, he's doing that. Like, all right, I took that personal. That's all I needed. Right. And it's like, I like to be in those rooms and I like to push myself and make me uncomfortable by guys that are further in the journey. So I keep that edge, and that's what I need anyways. I don't know if everyone's that way, but that's why I think the education's.
It's so important. Like, I mean, you've touched on so many things that just are in line with everything that we preach here at 0 to 100. It's relationships, it's action taking, it's having a big vision and going after your dreams. It's getting in the right rooms, the free education, it's the paid education. I mean, you're saying all the things align with, what makes successful people successful. And, just hearing that from you, like, I love the way you bring the energy. I love the way that, it's a no BS attitude of like, hey, I have this vision and I'm going to figure out how to get myself to that vision and you take action on it.
I'm going to pump Gabe's tires for 1 second and tell a story that I was kind of going to blindside him to tell him because I was talking about him with some buddies this weekend with Reed and Jeff Gaines. They say, what's up, Gabe? And this speaks to your audience and I want them all to hear this because this is the second time I met Gabe. And I think this story is important for all entrepreneurs to understand mindset. Gabe had a deal that was going a little sideways. And I'll never forget that Gabe, unlike everybody else who was in a similar position that was denying accountability, Gabe took responsibility. And I remember on the back of the bus, we had about an hour and a half long pointed conversation. And Gabe ran into the burning house, Travis, like you said. He fixed that deal. It's now gone on to be one of his best deals. He got uncomfortable. This is Gabe Hamel. It's an established real estate investor. But he strapped on his boots. he figured it out and you absolutely crushed it with that deal. And in that moment, what it told me was, this is a guy I want to know because this is character, this is intensity, this is integrity, and this is taking accountability for your actions. And if you get in a room with guys like that, regardless of where they are on their journey, it's very hard to fail. And I share that story to be like, you could have easily put your feet up and said, I've already arrived, I don't need this headache, but you ran towards the problem. And as a result of that, it paid off quite handsomely. And I think everybody can do that. When you take extreme ownership, when you take accountability, you put yourself in the room, that's where growth happens.
You hit it, man. Extreme ownership. Like, and I was in a similar deal. I don't know if he's talking about the deal that we have in
Oklahoma. And believe it or not, Travis was in a very similar deal, 4 times the size, 4 times the unit count from the same, not so wonderful partner. So I almost certain that's the story, I think. Travis.
Gabe and I are walking Oklahoma City. I was with him looking at, I was a year ahead of him in this nightmare. And Gabe's, at first you lament these damn guys, they ripped us off, they stole from us. And then you're like, okay, enough of that. I signed on the deal. It was my responsibility. The buck stops with me. And I think if you're talking about one mindset hack among many, get around smart people doing big things, but also take extreme ownership, because it is the buck does stop with us. And I think the minute you stop blaming the economy, the market, other operators, asset classes, and just be like, this is me. And I either control my failure or my success. And when you adopt that mindset, and then you get away from lamenting over it and you get into problem solving mode, which is really what entrepreneurs are. Like, the bigger the problems we solve, the more money we make. And if you look at it like a game and you're like, how do I solve this problem? What are all the tools in my toolkit? What are my contacts with lenders? What are my contacts with contractors? What are my like Gabe reached out to me right out of the gate and was like, hey, I noticed you're in this situation. Like, tell me about it. And then I introduced him to some contacts. He's introduced me to contacts. In fact, I introduced him to contractor contacts, which helped. He introduced me to some debt contacts that helped me. And it really is a team sport. Even if you're not investing together on a specific deal, you are investing together, and it is a team sport when it comes to sharing resources and knowledge. I love that you said that.
Well, I think too also, and I appreciate the kind words, Michael, and I first to admit that was by far the biggest kick in the balls, challenging, real estate deal I had been in 20 years, and on the back end of it, yeah, I'm in a much better place with that deal, and long term, that property is going to be a success story. That being said, like, it's important as entrepreneurs, as real estate investors, like, there are problems that are going to come up. And, you mentioned this, Travis mentioned this, Mitch has mentioned this in the past as well. But once you identify the problem, you can't soak in the problem. I mean, you could sit there and, woe is me. But like, as soon as you identify the problem, you got to go into solution mode, because solution mode, solving problems, back to what Mitch was saying, like, that problem solving, that's where things happen. That's where things change. That's where, you change the outcome from it being a problem to a success story. So, it's the longer you sit in the problem, the less time you're spending in, solving the problem mode.
Yeah. Crying in your Cheerios gets you nowhere.
Oh, yeah, that's one of our company's, actually 2 of them. Two of our company's core values. One is extreme ownership, but the other one is there are no problems. There are only solutions we haven't found yet. And everyone knows we don't use the P word. And that goes back to my days running the high school. The principal that had at the time, he used to say, he's like, it's easy. Anybody can come with me a problem. Anyone can tell me why something's not going to work. And if we want the same results as everyone else, we're going to lament on what doesn't work. But when we look at it differently and we reframe it, and my staff, you won't hear the P word around the company too often. And that word's like cancer. We don't even like it, right? Because it shuts down thinking, right? You give up control of yourself to somebody else. Imagine giving up someone else that much control over. Own it all.
Right.
The good, the bad, the ugly. Own it all. And I think that's very.
I thought you were going to say one of the core values: don't cry in your Cheerios.
I like that. Give me credit for that. I think if you could, please, Michael. The other thing too, though, is if you overcome big problems and have success on the back end, that's worth millions of dollars, because the knowledge that you gained through problem solving, the contacts you made. I've made amazing contacts. In fact, the company that took over managing our assets is going to help us with, in Oklahoma City is going to help Mitch and I with our mobile home park portfolio. So not only that, but it gives you the confidence. I overcame some big problems, and there was success on the back end. So not only do you learn the tactics, you learn the connections, but it gives you the confidence to also not, when the next problem comes around, you don't crawl under your desk, suck your thumb and cry. Like, you can handle it, that's worth millions of dollars right there.
Travis, you always mention crawling under the desk, sucking your thumb and crying. So like, I'm starting to think that this happened. Like I find
him like that, like weekly. I'm like, Travis, get out of there. Stop crying, buddy.
Stop crying.
Come on, here's a bowl of Cheerios.
Get out from your desk.
You're lucky to have us in your life, Travis. Michael, we are at the top of the hour, but we do have a final question that we ask all our guests at the end of the show, and I don't want to leave here without one of us asking you that final question. So, Travis, Mitch, one of you guys want to take it?
Mitch, you guys have the same hairdo as Michael and the same facial
Sexy
situation.
bald. All right, there we go.
The sexiest one's going to call. No. So Michael, this is a hypothetical. We like to ask this because we believe people on this, listening to this podcast may be in this situation. But hypothetical, you've lost everything. You've lost all of your money, your net worth, as well as your network. So all the people you know as well. You still have your experience. We always say, hey, you're sitting on a buddy's couch. By the way, the buddy is worthless as well because a lot of people are like, I'm going to ask my buddy for a job or money or whatever. He has no money and he's worse than you are. So the concept though is like, hey, you're on your buddy's couch and you want to go build what you've built. What's the first step? What do you go do? What do you attack first?
To build back what I have now or build back better?
Yeah, that first week, day. Yeah, like
build back what you have now. Like you want to go build freedom, like you talked about. You want to go build a real estate portfolio. Yeah.
100%. So assuming I have nothing, but I still have my knowledge, I would go to a couple of local meetups. I'm assuming like I'm dead broke. I got nothing. I got to like get there I got to bum an Uber ride or something. I would go to any local meetup I could for about 30 days. I talk to every investor in that room and find their buy box. I would then work leads, work my network, connect.
No network.
Oh, I thought I had a network. There's no network.
No network.
All right. Then what I would do is that changes everything. I thought you said I did get my network. Then what I would do is I would go to the local meetup. I would find people's buy box. I would get online. I'd find those deals for their buy box. I'd negotiate those deals because I have my experience, I believe. And I would get a piece of those deals that front loads a couple of fees to get me some disposable income. And then I'd scale up from there.
Well said. Well said.
Deals and people, deals and network, right?
Your network is, I think once you realize that your network is everything in this space, you're playing an infinite game.
100% agree. Michael, this has been an awesome episode. Definitely one of my favorite episodes, man. You're always fun to talk to, always fun to hang out with. You always bring the energy, and we appreciate you more than you know.
Thank you guys for having me.